In this tutorial video, we're going to be focused on a report that looks at the PlayStation 5 storefront, allowing us to look at elements such as what the top performing titles are, the top performing publishers, and then a general breakdown of the trends that have occurred during the time period that we focus on. So, what I've got here is a blank report. We're going to replicate what we see here, and I'll show you how to go about building each widget there. So first things first, we set our global filters. I've already set up 3 ahead of time. You can see we've focused it to the previous month. We're looking at the PS5, and then we've set the store location to console because that allows the query to run quicker and smoother for us. The last filter that I'm going to put in, if we go back to discoverability, is profile. It may be if you're subscribed to multiple profiles, you might only want to reflect on one. So in this case, I'm going to choose general. These are profiles that have no purchase or play history behind them. If I hit update, anything we add to this report now is going to follow these filters that we have in our global filter section. So the first thing that you saw on that previous report is we're going to add an image just very quickly, give it a nice little opening. If we go to edit widget, my library, as you can see, I've got a whole number of different examples. Yours will be different as well. Essentially, find the image you want to use, select use image, click do it, and then you can adjust its location on the report like so. There we go. So the first segment of our report is just giving us a breakdown of the genres that are seeing a more prominent presence on the PS5 stores. And then what it's ranking it by is what we call Flare Score. And Flare Score is essentially not just taking the quantity of placements we've picked up for games, but also the value of them, where they're located, and their general sizing in relation to other placements within the same area. So in this case, we can see that Action Adventure has got the best Flare Score when you compare it with any other genre that we're capturing as well. On the right-hand side, meanwhile, we've actually set up what we call a parent-child link. So what I can do is I can interact with, let's say, sport by double-clicking. It's then going to refresh those 2 widgets on the right because they are children to this parent. And then it's drilling into that particular genre, in this case, sport, to see which products have got the best performing scores there. So in order to replicate that, the first step we want to do is build our left-hand chart here. So if we select add a new widget and go onto a blank graph, we can then start to build that pie chart. And the first step there is, of course, choosing pie chart. Now, value. What do we want our pie chart to be valued by? And in this case, we're going to select cost. Now, cost is basically a measurement of the flare. That's where our flare score sits. If we then click on the spanner icon, we can rename it to score or flare score or whatever it is you would like to use. And then we're going to summarize the values by adding it up. We do have other options as well, like the minimum score, the maximum score, the average score, but we want to add up all the scores from all the placements for that genre. And then lastly, I'm going to hit numeric as well. Category is essentially dictating what we want to break down our slices of our pie chart by. So in this case, we want to break down each slice as a genre. And then once we've done that, we can then sort our pie slices so we get the biggest slices by score to the lowest. And then if we want to, we can even then limit how many pie slices are in our chart. So we might only want to see the top 10 performing genres. We'll give it a name. I'll call it top genres. And then when we're finished, we can then select do it. And that's going to then load in our pie chart for us. Now, while that's loading in, we can actually start to work on our child pie chart there as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add another blank graph, shimmy that across to the right-hand side there, and then hit edit. So it's the exact same process we just had before. Select pie chart again. The value, just like before, we want it to be cost, which again, we can rename to score. Sum, we want to add up the scores for each individual game. And the category this time, of course, is going to be different. So no longer we want to break it down by genre anymore. This time we want to break it down by product title. So each slice is going to be a different product title. Now, if you want to make a parent-child link, what you'll need to do is hop into filters. If you select new filter, what we're going to do is link these 2 charts together by their genre. So normally, if you wanted to filter by genre, you would type in the genre, and then this pie chart would then show you shooter data. Instead, if we want to use parent-child, we can hit this chain icon, and it's going to search for any widgets that use genre, in this case, within its chart or table. If I select top genres, we want to keep auto update on, and then initially we'll select row 1. And just like before, I'm going to limit how many we see and then give it a title as well. Last thing, just quickly sort our pie chart from biggest slice to smallest slice, and then we can hit do it. Now what that's going to do is it's going to load in. I'm just going to double click on RPG, and you'll see now when this loads in, we should be seeing RPG products. So we'll see the top performing RPG titles. So when I hit that auto link switch to on, it basically means that you can interact with the parent and double click, and it's going to update the right hand side. So now if we wanted to look at fighter, double click on fighter, and then all this here is going to show fighter data. You'll also see above, I had a table or a very simple table that said currently selected sport. Essentially, I put this in here as an extra little flourish because it shows the user what they're currently selecting or what is currently being showed in the pie chart below. And that process is very simple. This time, if we go to blank table, move that across there like so, and edit widget, all we're going to do is just build a single column table with genre in. And then just like before, we're going to make that parent-child link to top genres. Again, you could type any number in there, click do it, and then let's double click on RPG, and that's going to do exactly what happened before, where it will update our pie chart to RPG and show us RPG titles. And you can see at the top there, it's then showing us RPG. Gives the user a little bit of information to let them know that currently we're looking at RPG related products. And if you wanted to change the actual look of it so it has a bit of a bigger font so it just stands out a bit more, all you would need to do is go to your widget settings, select apply unique styles, and then what you could do if you wanted to is you could centralize the body of the text. And so we should have RPG in a bigger font there that just stands out neatly. Of course, I would remove the new table if we don't need it. I could centralize that text as well if I wanted to just tidy it up a little bit more. There we go. And so that's the first section of the report, using not just charts, but also parent-child linking as well. If we scroll a bit further down, we then move on to a table. And so what this is doing is it's actually showing us a publisher breakdown this time. And what it's doing is it's actually showing us the number of placements as well as the score that those placements have achieved, or the flare score. And then I've used a calculated field at the end, which then also shows what the average score. Each placement could get a maximum score of 10, and it's showing what the average is of all the placements for said publisher. I've even ranked it by the top performing average scores there as well. So if we wanted to replicate that, this time we want to choose blank table. We can then rearrange our widgets like so. So instead of choosing an axis or the slices of your pie chart in a table, we're now choosing what columns we want to show. So if we refer back, we have a publisher column, a placement column, a score column, and an average score column. So the first thing we want to do is select publisher, which is in the product data set there. And then we hop back over to discoverability and start to add those placements and scores. So activities is what the placement default name is. And again, if you wanted to, just like our chart, we can rename that particular column like we have there. And then we can start to put in cost as well, which in this case we will call score. And we want that sum and numeric formatting. Now, to get the average score per placement, this time we want to use calculated. And then you'll see we have a number of options, but in this case, we'll choose calculation. If I then hit the calculator icon, on this screen, what we can do is build our own equations, our own formulae using data sets that are already built into Fusion. So if you go to add a line, you can choose the fields that are currently within the actual widget you're using there. So you can see we've got our placements column and our score column. Or if you choose other, you can choose any data set to add to your equation, even if it's not in that table you're using at that moment. But in this case, we're going to choose placements, add an extra line, and you can see we've got plus, minus, divide, and multiply. I'm going to choose divided by, other way around, score divided by placements. So what this then does is it's going to show us the average score per placement that's been achieved there. So if we then close that and then give it a rename, so we'll call it average score per placement, or PP, set it to a numerical 2 decimal places, and then we're just going to rank that from highest to lowest. If I select do it, of course we haven't put a title in, but if you want to, you could hop in here and say average score per placement. that will then load in for us on the side. While that's loading in, we can then move on to the next segment, which is looking at, again, showing us some pie charts, looking at the top performing publishers by placement count, and on the right-hand side, the top performing publishers by Flare score. So it's showing you the same, similar sort of data, but ranking these publishers by different metrics entirely. So pie charts, which we've already done before. We go over to add a new widget, go to a blank graph. And then this time, again, just like before, we want to choose activities as our value. Of course, selecting pie charts. So this is going to rank our publishers by the number of individual placements that fan sensors have picked up on the store there. And again, we could rename it. We could call it placements if we wanted to, just like we did earlier, numeric. And in the category, we go to product, and then we go to publisher. And then, of course, we'll rank it from highest performing publisher to lowest. And if we want to, we can then rename it and call it top publishers in this case, and we can limit it to 15 publishers. And then when we're happy, we can click on do it. And that's going to load in our pie chart for us. So we can see Sony is top, EA, Ubisoft, and so on, with thousands of placements that have been picked up within our time frame. Now, neat little trick here is that, of course, we wanted to build that second widget here, which was another pie chart. We could build it again from the ground up by doing what we did earlier. If we use the duplicate or the clone button, what this does is it actually builds an exact replica of that widget, which has everything plugged in already. We can now just make some adjustments. So instead of building from the ground up, what we can do is we can just hop in here, change activities to cost, call it score and sum. And then, of course, we just want to give it a quick rename. So we could call this top publishers by score. So you can see how that saved us a lot of time. Instead of building it from the ground up, we've just taken the existing work we've done and made a couple of minor adjustments. So now we'll have that pie chart, which shows us not top publishers by placement count, but the top publishers by the Flare score that those placements have accumulated as well. Earlier on, you can then see as well our table there that's showing us the top publishers by the average score per placement, with Skybound Games at the top, Ilphonic, Larian, and so on, with that average of 3.2 out of 10, 3.01 out of 10. So now we've got that same pie chart, but now you can see that Sony has a bigger slice of that pie chart when you consider the score from those placements than if you just counted it from a pure placement perspective. The next segment, we're looking at it from a publisher perspective again, but now we're using a combination of charts in the same chart. So the columns there are showing the number of placements that each publisher has achieved in that time frame, whereas we've also added a line chart in which shows the number of products that are responsible for those placements. So it just gives you that nice perspective of seeing those that are perhaps seeing a lot of coverage from less placement, or those that are seeing a lot of placement from having a wide library of products being featured, in Sony's case here, with 38 titles accumulating over 7,500 placements. So in order to build that, we'll go with blank graph. Just going to resize it like so. If I then go to edit widget, now, because we're dealing with a line and column chart, we use the y-axis and the x-axis here. So the first one being discoverability, and then we're going to do activities, which of course I'm going to rename as placements, format it to numerical, which will insert some commas when the numbers get too big. And then for the number of placements, we want to select column graph. This button here shows you how you want your y-axis to align, if it's on the left side, the right side, or if you want to hide it entirely. We'll keep it as left. And then the category along the bottom. So in this case, if we hop back, it's a list of publishers. So what we'll do is we'll go to product and publisher. And of course, we want to sort that by highest placement count to lowest. Now, in order to add that line, which counts the number of products, what we'll do is we'll go add another axis. You can see it's already set to line, so we can keep that as is. And then what we'll do is we'll then choose product title. Now, at the moment, that's not going to actually count the number of products. So what you'll need to do is click the spanner icon and choose that summarize values by. You'll see there is a count icon there, and then we can call it number of SKUs. So now our line chart will then also follow our column chart to show the number of titles that we've picked up from those placements for that publisher. Again, if we go to widget settings, we can give it a title. So we can call it top publishers with SKU count. And then we can also limit the number of results we have in that chart as well. So I'm going to put 15. When we're happy, we've sorted it, we've set it all up, click do it. And that's going to then load in our hybrid chart with a column chart and a line chart there as well. There we go. You'll also see by default, it will always align your y-axis to the left-hand side. If I hop back in, I can quickly adjust that and put right. So it then makes things a bit tidier. You've not got too many y-axis on one side. This way we can have one on the left and one on the right, which just looks a bit cleaner when it's loaded. There we go. Much better. So if we work our way down, got a similar looking chart here. This is looking at the individual titles, not only the highest count of sponsored placements, but we're also splitting it out to show where those sponsored placements have been picked up within the store. So you can see we've got the latest section, the collection section, the deal section, all these different locations that we've picked up. So in order to replicate that, build a new blank graph, resize, click edit widget. So what we'll do here is we want discoverability, activities, which again, we'll rename to placements, set it to numeric. Along the x-axis this time, we would like to use product title. And then we're going to rank it from highest to lowest. Now, in order to get that split, so we can split our columns into what sections these sponsored placements have been picked up, we want to add a data series. And the data series is essentially saying, hey, what am I separating my columns into? So we'll move from line chart to, we'll have column graph, but we want columns stacked. So basically, it's going to stack your column up into different segments. What we want to split them by, if we go to discoverability, we want to split them by category. So now each little segment of our column is going to show the number of placements within different category of that store. In order to filter our chart as well, so it only shows sponsored placements, we want to hop into filters because at the moment our global filter is not filtering to a particular type of placement. So if we go to new filter, placement feature, you'll see SPONS for sponsored. So now that's going to remove any placements that are not sponsored for just the DLC, for a promotional, for subscription-based placements. And then once we're finished as well, I'm going to limit to 15 titles. And then we'll call this top sponsored titles. When we're finished, if we click on run, that's going to load in. And then we should have, just like before, 15 columns here, but segmented out to show where those placements have been picked up. So we have latest, we have collections. So Fortnite had a 50-50 split between its sponsored placements. War Thunder, meanwhile, was seeing all of its placements occurring from latest only, no other section within the store. Our last segment of the report is now looking at a table and showing the highest flare score by individual title. But not only that, it's also adding in some extra columns that shows you where a lot of the scores come from. So when you have the total score, we can see that the full game or just a general placement for the full game is accumulating 1,200 points of that score. Sponsored placements, meanwhile, are 388. Now, of course, that doesn't add up to 3395. There are other different segments as well. I've only put 4 in just to give a general idea of how that would look, but I'll show you how to build that in a moment. What I've then also done is created a parent-child link between this table and this table. So now if I was to double click on a title, in this case, Rise of Ronin, this is going to go and give me a list of all the console placements we've picked up on the PS5 for Rise of Ronin, including the profile we've picked it up from, the territory, the section and subsection we picked it up from, and then the score out of 10 that we've assigned it based on where we've picked that particular placement up there, along with, of course, a screenshot, which we can load up and then look in more detail where and what that placement looks like for said product. Like so. There we go. There's our Rise of Ronin picture up here. So in order to build that, of course, first thing we want to do is build a table. We go to edit widget. And then the first thing we have is a rank number, a product title, score. Let's focus on these three columns first. So the first thing we want to do is we'll add product title, and then we'll add a discoverability cost column as well, which will again call score, give it a sum. We want to add up those placements. Now, in order to put the rank column in, if we go back to calculated field, you may have seen earlier on we had these different categories apart from calculation. We have sort. If we go into the calculation, we can say, right, I want to sort or rank this column based on a certain field. So in this case, we might want to rank it by our score. And then we want to rank it from highest to lowest. So what that will say is like, that will say rank number 1 will be the product that has the highest score. Rank number 2 will be the product that has the second highest score, and so on. So if we close that and then drag it to the top, and of course we can then rename it as well as we see fit. Now, if I just run this real quick, you'll then see how that looks so far for our table. Now, in order to build these extra columns here, we're going to use what we call column-specific filters, because the score is looking at all placements, whereas the full game and the extra content and the sponsored columns are only looking for placements that have been labeled as sponsored or for DLC or for promotional placements. There we go. So we have Fortnite number 1, Final Fantasy number 2, and so on with our ranking working as expected. So if I edit the input here, what we're going to do is we're going to add another discoverability column. And of course, this time we're going to put cost again. We're going to use sum. And now this time we can call this full game. Now, what I want to do is select this funnel. And then just like you would apply filters to a table or a chart, you can apply filters to that individual column. So now, if we went with placement feature, we can go with FG, which stands for full game. So now this column here is only going to show me any score that's been accounted for full game placements, unsponsored, unpromotional, nothing to do with DLC. Now, I can then copy this by clicking on this button, hop in here, and we could say, well, let's put this one as a promotional placement. Of course, we want to then hop in and rename. So I'm going to put promo, do it. And then we can keep adding more and more of these in for each different type of placement that we pick up there. But we'll stop at 2 in the interest of time. Just going to give this a title real quick. We'll call it final table. Do it. And then that will load in. Now, while that's loading in, we can get to work on our list of console placements, which we have down the bottom there. Now, we could build this from the ground up. Just to mention as well, we do have a library of different widgets that are already pre-built. So if I go to the discoverability filter here, you'll see we actually have one which is called list of console placements. If I add that in, that will do all the building for me. So if you wanted to skip ahead and just have a template being put in, then you can totally do that by clicking and adding here. What we'll do, though, is we will build our table from the ground up, just as we have done with everything else in here. So the first thing we'll build is our columns. So this time we'll go with product title. And the idea of this table, of course, is to go to as granular level as possible to get those individual placements that we've picked up. So what we'll do is we'll keep adding in as much detail as we can. So we'll go with product format. We'll go with discoverability this time, and then we can start to put in some extra detail. So activity date. We'll format the date just to show the UK. We don't need the time. We just want the date there. We can then put in the country that we've picked it up from. We can put in retailer general would be PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, but of course it's going to show us PS5 in this case. Category and category type, so the locations of the store as well. And then, of course, we can keep going and adding more. I'll add cost in as well, which, as we know, we've been calling score this time. Set it to sum. So then this is going to show us these individual placements that we've picked up. Now, of course, we need to link that parent-child as well. So if we go to filters, we can then filter, in this case, by product title. And then, if you remember, we called our table final table. So if I click on the chain, it's looking for any tables or charts that have product title within them. We want product final table, row 1. And then we can call it list of placements. Do it. And then that's now going to create a table which is then dependent on what is selected within this first table up here, or the parent, if you will. So in this case, what I might do is double click on Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown, and then what will appear here is a list of all the placements we've picked up for the Prince of Persia title here in more detail. Now you may see that also we've got main section and subsection here. Again, this is just a simple case of renaming those sections that we've picked up. So if we hop back in here, you can see there we've got all the placements along with the score as well. Category and category type. So category would be your main area of the PS5 store, latest collections, deals, subscriptions. And then the category type goes into that little bit more detail and says within the latest area in the must-see spot is where we picked up Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown there. And of course, that being quite a prominent spot, it's achieved a score of 6 there. But if you wanted to as well, we do actually have our scores right down to 2 decimal places. So if you went into here, I've set it to numerical, but if we went to 2 decimal, it would just give you that little bit more detail on the actual value of that placement. And there you have it. One example of a PS5 focused store report. As I mentioned earlier, we've set it up in such a way that if we wanted to change this in any way, so instead of doing last month, we wanted to do last week, we could use our global filters here to do that. We could change it if, for example, you were subscribed to other profile types. You might say, I actually want to look at RPG profiles. What you would then do is hit update filter, and that's going to refresh our entire report for us to then show us RPG related profiles for the previous week.